It's like rain on your wedding day. It's a free ride when you've already paid. It's the good advice that you just wouldn't take. Those are all things that Alanis Morissette sang were ironic in her song of the same name some years ago. And as people pointed out to her down the years, one of the things that was most ironic about the song was that it wasn't really about irony at all. Virtually all the things, like rain on your wedding day, were, at the end of the day, just hard luck. In what we're about to look at in chapter 6, though, we see what one writer has described as the most comically ironic scene in the whole of the Bible. And in it, we're going to see we're called to set our hope on the God of the turnaround. In the very first verse, we see the turning point of the whole book. So let me read it to you and see what you make of it. That night, the king could not sleep. Yep, that's it. That really is it. That is the turning point of the whole book. A sleepless night for King Xerxes. But let me read on, and perhaps we'll begin to see why this is such a crucial moment. That night, the king could not sleep, so he ordered the book of the Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. It was found recorded there that Mordecai had exposed Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. What honour and recognition has Mordecai received for this? The king asked. Nothing has been done for him, his attendants answered. In the normal scheme of things, someone who has done the king such a good turn as this would expect to be well rewarded for it. But we saw back 5 years ago, earlier on in the book of Esther, that nothing was done for Mordecai. It seemed so unjust at the time, especially at a time when Haman, his soon-to-be adversary, was rising to power out of seemingly nowhere. And yet now, perhaps we begin to see beneath the surface what was being done by an unseen power behind the scenes. In verse 4 we read, the king said, "Who is in the court?" Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the palace to speak to the king about impaling Mordecai on the pole he had set up for him. His attendants answered, "Haman is standing in the court." "Bring him in," the king ordered. Well, doubtless delighted at his scheme and that today was going to be the day when he finally got rid of his hated adversary, Mordecai. Haman is hurrying to put his plan into effect. But who speaks next and what they say will be another crucial moment in the unfolding plot. Verse 6 says, when Haman entered, the king asked him, "What should be done for the man the king delights to honour?" What else could the king mean? Surely this is me, thinks Haman. Who else could there be who would possibly fit that description? It's perfect. That's what he thinks. But of course, for the informed reader, it's what we think too. This is a perfect moment in the plot. This is a moment of the most delicious irony. He thinks he's going to get rid of the Jew he so personally detests, and the king seems to be saying something that's music to his ears about a reward that's coming his way. And so we read, now Haman thought to himself, "Who is there that the king would rather honour than me?" So he answered the king, "For the man the king delights to honour, let them bring a royal robe the king has worn, and a horse the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head. Then let the robe and horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the man the king delights to honour, and lead him on the horse through the city streets, proclaiming before him, 'This is what is done for the man the king delights to honour.'" Just the night before this, Haman was boasting to his entourage of the honour in which he'd had bestowed on him by the king. So Haman's insatiable lust for more honour makes him bold enough to ask of the king things that even he, Haman, has not yet received. The king's own robes, the king's own horse, all the trappings of royalty. And he wants it to be shown off in as public a way as possible. The king gives the command, "Go at once. Get the robe and the horse and do just as you've suggested for Mordecai the Jew who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you have recommended." So Haman got the robe and the horse, He robed Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city streets, proclaiming before him, "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honour." In that single moment, the annoying pebble in Haman's expensive shoe suddenly transforms into a boulder that crushes him. Karen Jobes, the commentator, writes, Haman's splendid humiliation results from a series of coincidences, each believable in itself, and yet a series that is completely beyond Haman's control. The mighty Haman is rendered powerless by a chance event when the king just happens to have a sleepless night. He just happens to have the chronicles of his reign read to him. The story of Mordecai's loyalty just happens to come to his attention at the same moment when Haman just happens to be plotting Mordecai's death. We read on. Afterwards, Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed home with his head covered in grief and told Zeresh his wife and all his friends everything that had happened to him. Just the night before this, Haman and his cronies had hatched the plan to get rid of Mordecai and display his body publicly. In the most astonishing reversal, Haman rushes home, having spent the bulk of his day parading Mordecai around the city, very much alive, and now in the place of honour that Haman so desperately craved. Who else could this be but the God of the turnaround at work behind the scenes? Scholars have pointed out how the structure of the book points us in this direction. There are what the Bible uses many times, something called a chiasm, to show by the structure of these central chapters how again and again small reversals add up and lead us in the direction of this moment when the king has a sleepless night. The structure of the entire book also can be shown to point us in this direction. There is at the beginning 2 feasts thrown by the king. There are 2 feasts at the end thrown by the Jews. In the middle there are 2 feasts laid on by Queen Esther, and sandwiched between them is this moment that is central to the plot, a sleepless night for the king. That's it. That's how ordinary it gets. But by making this the central feature of the whole book, the author is showing us something really important. He's showing us that none of the human actors in the story are at the centre of the action directing it. No, there's an unseen power at work, and it is this unseen one who directs the events. In this book, there is not just the solving of a problem, but a complete turnaround. There is not just a rescue for Mordecai, but a triumph for him. There is not just a sorting out, but a turning of the tables. And if we know the story of the Bible and know how God continues to act through the rest of history for his people, we shouldn't be surprised by this. In the letter to the Colossians, we read of a great turnaround, the greatest of all. We read that God has rescued his people from the dominion of darkness and brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. This reversal that has been worked out for Mordecai will need to be followed in the chapters that follow with another reversal, a reversal of fortune for all of the Jews, not just for one of them in the person of Mordecai. There's more to see on that. But this reversal, extraordinary and probable as it is, points us in the direction of another reversal that will undoubtedly take place. And we who are those who have set our hope on the God who has brought about the greatest turnaround of all, the turnaround from death to life for Jesus, and through him, death to life for his people. We are people who are called to set that hope before ourselves, but also to set it before others. The historian and writer Tom Holland recently wrote these interesting words. He wrote, "Rather than speaking with the voice of prophecy, rather than explaining to a grieving and anxious people how the dead will rise into the blaze of eternal life, rather than proclaiming the miracles and mysteries that they uniquely exist to proclaim, church leaders seem to have opted instead to talk like middle managers." Are we saying things that are distinctive from other people in the face of the crisis that our country and many other countries is facing? Or are we just saying the same kinds of things in the same kinds of ways? We have something that can be found nowhere else. We have true and certain hope in the face of death. A man has risen from the dead. There was an empty tomb to prove it. People went out to proclaim it, and they continue to do so today. Will we be those who keep that hope before us and who set that hope before others? Our hope in the God of the most extraordinary turnarounds. Yes, sometimes we might have to endure embarrassment. Sometimes we might have our legs pulled. But like Esther, will we go all in for true life with God? And will we set before others the hope that we ourselves have? It's the hope that Peter tells his readers to be ready to give the reason for to those who might ask. We're going to sing of that hope in our final song just now. We're going to sing of the wondrous mystery that Christ has given his life for us and brought about for us forgiveness and the certainty of new life with him now and forever. Let's sing together.